Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading. Today we will discuss the articles displayed on the screen from the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 13 September 2019. So let us start our discussion. This article on page number 12 highlights the new schemes which have been launched by the PM. And these schemes were earlier announced in the budget of the Government of India. So these schemes will form an important part for us from the preliminary examination point of view. And these schemes include the Pradhan Mantri Kisan Mandhan Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Laghu Vyapari Mandhan Yojana, and also the launch of Eklavya model schools. So let us look at all these schemes which can be important for us from preliminary examination point of view. So the first scheme which has been launched by the PM is the PM Kisan Mandhan Yojana. And this falls under the Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers' Welfare. Now let us look at the key details of this scheme. So it is a voluntary and contributory pension scheme for all small and marginal farmers. So you need to keep in mind that the beneficiaries are all small and marginal farmers. Further, the entry age is of 18 up to 40 years. And this has a provision of minimum fixed pension of rupees 3,000 on attaining the age of 60 years. So whoever is contributing between the age group of 18 to 40 will get minimum rupees 3,000. However, if a person contributes more amount, he or she can get more than rupees 3,000. So the floor value which has been decided is rupees 3,000. Further, another feature is that the central government will contribute to the pension fund an equal amount which is contributed by the eligible farmer. So for example, if a farmer is contributing rupees 100 per month, the government of India will also contribute rupees 100. Now another speciality about this scheme is that the farmers can opt to allow his or her monthly contribution to the scheme to be made from the benefits drawn from the PM Kisan Yojana or the Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Nidhi scheme. Now you might be knowing that at the starting of this year, the government had launched the PM Kisan Yojana. And in this Yojana, the government is transferring rupees 60,000 in 3 installments to all the farmers in India. So the farmers can utilize this amount for paying the monthly premium of the PM Kisan Mandhan Yojana. So this is another feature that these 6,000 rupees which were to be transferred to the farmers in the PM Kisan Samman Nidhi Yojana can now be directly used by the farmers for contributing their monthly contribution to PM Kisan Mandhan Yojana. And at the end of 60 years, these farmers will get a pension which will be minimum rupees 3,000. So all these features are important for us from preliminary examination point of view. The second in this line is the Pradhan Mantri Laghu Vyapari Mandhan Yojana. And this scheme is being implemented by the Ministry of Labour and Employment. So under this scheme, all the shopkeepers, retail traders and self-employed persons are assured a minimum monthly pension of rupees 3,000 every month after attaining an age of 60 years. So this scheme will have similar benefits as compared to the Pradhan Mantri Kisan Mandhan Yojana. Further, all shopkeepers and self-employed persons as well as retail traders with GST turnover of below rupees 1.5 crores and age between 18 to 40 years are eligible for this scheme. And this scheme is expected to benefit more than 3 crore small shopkeepers and traders. So these are 2 schemes which have been inaugurated by the Prime Minister. Now after this, let us look at the launch of Eklavya model schools which have been inaugurated by the Prime Minister. Now besides these 2 schemes, the Prime Minister has launched 462 Eklavya model schools across the country in the tribal dominated areas. So let us look at some features of the Eklavya model schools and when they started in India. Now regarding the Eklavya model residential schools, you should note that it was started by the Ministry of Tribal Affairs in the year 1997-98. And the main aim of establishing these schools was to impart quality educations to the children of the scheduled tribes in remote areas and in order to enable them to avail the opportunities in high-end professional educational courses and get employment in various sectors. So these residential schools were mainly targeted for educating the scheduled tribe children in remote areas. And under the guidelines, every block with more than 50% of the scheduled tribes population or at least 20,000 tribal people will have a Eklavya model residential school. And these schools will be on par with the Navodaya schools, which are another centrally governed schools. and these will have special facilities for preserving the local art and culture, besides providing skills and training in the sports and skill development. So these are few features of the Eklavya Model Residential Schools, and the points to be noted are that it is an initiative of Ministry of Tribal Affairs, and this was started way back in 1997 and 98. Further, the Prime Minister has inaugurated India's second multimodal transport terminal at Sahibganj in Jharkhand. And this terminal was constructed on River Ganga under the Jal Marg Vikas project. And last year, the Prime Minister had inaugurated India's first multimodal terminal at Varanasi. So in this slide, let us look at some features of the Jal Marg Vikas project. So this Jal Marg Vikas project is mainly aimed at capacity augmentation of the navigation on the National Waterway 1. And it is being implemented with the technical assistance and investment support of the World Bank. So as you might be knowing that the National Waterway runs from Allahabad to Haldia on River Ganga. Further, this project is expected to be completed by March 2023. Now, what is the aim of this project? So it aims to develop the stretch of River Ganga between Varanasi to Haldia for navigation of large vehicles up to 1500 to 2000 tons weight. And the implementing agency for this project is the Inland Waterways Authority of India. And in this project, 3 multimodal terminals are being created. So first was inaugurated at Varanasi in Uttar Pradesh. Second was inaugurated by the PM at Sahibganj, Jharkhand. And the third will be at Haldia, West Bengal, which is yet to be completed. So these were few schemes and the projects which were inaugurated by the Prime Minister. And these can be important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. With this, let's take up the next article. Now, this article on page number 9 talks about the Supreme Court's decision to continue its stay on the eviction of forest dwellers. Now, earlier the Supreme Court had ordered the eviction of tribals and other forest dwellers who did not have titles under the Forest Right Act. However, the centre had moved against this order of the Supreme Court, and this led to a stay by the Supreme Court on its own order. So this news article highlights that the Supreme Court has extended that stay on the eviction of, which includes the tribals and the other traditional forest dwellers. So this will form a part of the preliminary examination syllabus under the topic Indian Polity. Now there are 2 important acts related to the tribals in India. The first is the Forest Right Act of 2006 and the other one is the PESA Act of 1996. So in this background, let us understand the various features of the Forest Rights Act and the PESA Act from our preliminary examination point of view. Now regarding the Forest Rights Act, you should note that in the colonial times, the control over forests was with the colonial government, and the traditional rights of the tribals and the forest dwelling communities were not recognized. Now, in the late 1990s, the government of India recognized that the tribal communities and the other forest dwelling communities have rights over the forest produce and the forest lands. So, in realization of these facts, the government enacted the Forest Right Act 2006. And this act recognizes the claims of tribals on the forest resources and ownership on the land. Further, this act grants legal recognition to the rights of tribals and other traditional forest dwelling communities. So here you should note that it includes both the tribals as well as communities which are other than tribals or other traditional forest dwelling communities. So this fact is important for us from preliminary examination point of view, because most of us can get confused with the term only tribals. Now, various rights have been recognized under the Forest Rights Act. So let us look at these rights one by one. So mainly 4 types of rights have been recognized under the Forest Rights Act 2006. The first is related to the title rights. Second is related to the use rights. Third is the relief and developmental rights. And fourth are related to the forest management rights. Now, under the title rights, ownership to the land that is being farmed by the tribals or other forest dwellers has been provided. And this ownership of land has been subjected to a maximum of 4 acres. Further, regarding the ownership rights, you should note that ownership is only for the land that is actually being cultivated by the concerned family, which means that no new lands can be granted under the Forest Right Acts. So only those communities will have rights or title rights which have been farming or cultivating the forest land for considerable period of time, which means that no new allocation will be granted under the Forest Right Act 2006, which means that it recognizes only the traditional rights of tribals and other forest dwelling communities. The second is related to the use of forest produce. The ownership of minor forest produce has been provided for the tribals and other forest dwelling communities, which means that major forest produce like timber etc. are still controlled by the government, and the rights over these major forest produce have not been provided to these communities. Then there are relief and developmental rights under this act. So this act provides for rehabilitation in case of illegal eviction or forced displacement. It also provides provisions related to basic amenities, and all these relief and developmental rights are subject to restrictions for the forest protection. The fourth rights are related to the management of forest. So in this line, the rights of tribals and other forest dwelling communities have been provided to protect the forests and the wildlife, because the forests and tribal communities have been known to live in harmony with the forests and the wildlife. So the points that are important for us from preliminary examination point of view are that under the Forest Right Act, legal recognition of traditional rights have been granted to tribals as well as other forest dwelling communities or other traditional forest dwelling communities. Secondly, it provides for ownership or title rights in forests only to those communities which have been traditionally cultivating land in the forest areas. And this means that no new land can be granted under this act. Further, the act provides for control or ownership over the minor forest produce, which means that it does not provide for ownership or control of major forest produce. And thirdly, it provides relief and developmental rights, which means that it provides rehabilitation in case of forced displacement, and it also provides rights related to the management of forests. Now after this, let us understand who all are eligible for these rights under this act, and also who decides as to who gets the recognition of title rights under the Forest Right Act 2006. Now, who all are eligible for rights under the Forest Right Acts? So, those eligible include those people who are residing in forest or forest lands and depending on forest and forest land for a livelihood. Secondly, the claimant must be a member of scheduled tribe in that area, or the claimant must be residing in the forest area for 75 years at least. So, these are the two criteria which define the rights or ownership rights under the Forest Right Act. So only if a claimant is a member of scheduled tribe or he has been residing in the forest for 75 years. Now who decides these rights? So in this line, the Gram Sabha recommends whose rights should be recognized. So everyone who is claiming rights in the forest under the Forest Right Act are decided or recommended by the Gram Sabha. So all these points that we have discussed are important for us from preliminary examination point of view. Now after understanding key facts related to the Forest Right Act, let us understand key features of the PESA Act. Now the PESA Act was passed in 1996, and this PESA Act means Panchayat Extension to the Scheduled Areas Act 1996. So this means that the PESA Act of 1996 is applicable only to the 5th schedule areas. Now here you should note that the 6th schedule areas are not included under the PESA Act. This is because the 6th schedule areas already have various provisions for the protection of the tribal communities in those areas, and these provisions have been provided in the constitution itself. For example, the 6th schedule provides for district councils, regional councils, etc. However, to extend the provisions of Panchayati Raj institutions to the 5th schedule areas, the PESA Act was enacted in 1996. So this means that the provisions under the PESA Act are different from the provisions which are provided in the Panchayati Raj Institutions Constitution Amendment Act of 1992. Now let us look at some salient features of the Panchayat Extension to Scheduled Areas Act 1996. So this act provides that the legislation can be enacted by the state governments on panchayats in the scheduled areas or the 5th schedule areas. And these legislation on the panchayats or the Panchayati Raj institutions in the scheduled areas shall be in conformity with the customary law, social and religious practices, and traditional management practices of the community resources. Which means that these Panchayati Raj institutions in the scheduled or the 5th schedule areas should be in conformity with the traditional laws of the tribal communities. Secondly, it provides for the area which should be included as a Gram Sabha. So in this it provides that habitation or a group of habitations or a hamlet comprising a community and managing its affairs in accordance with the traditions and customs and shall have a separate Gram Sabha. So this provides that the grouping of areas under the Gram Panchayat shall be done in accordance with those people who are managing or those communities who are managing its own affairs in accordance with the traditions and their customs. Thirdly, every Gram Sabha will safeguard and preserve the traditions and customs of people, their cultural identity, community resources, and customary mode of dispute resolution. And finally, the Gram Sabhas in these areas will have roles and responsibilities in approving all the developmental works in villages, identify the beneficiaries, and issue certificates for the utilization of funds. So in short, all the activities that are undertaken in the Schedule 5th areas in the Panchayati Raj institutions should be in accordance with the traditional or the customary laws of tribal communities. Now under this PESA Act, the Gram Sabhas and Panchayats have been provided with powers to regulate certain things. And these are compulsory provisions under the PESA Act. So these are very important for us from preliminary examination point of view. So in this line, the Gram Sabhas or the Panchayats will have powers to manage. So this term minor water bodies is important here because they will not be able to control major water bodies like dams, etc. Secondly, the Gram Sabhas have power of mandatory consultation in matters of land acquisition in those scheduled areas or the Gram Sabha areas. Thirdly, the Gram Sabhas have power to control institutions and functionaries in all social sectors and local plans. Fourthly, the Gram Sabhas have power for resettlement and rehabilitation and prospecting licenses or mining leases for minor minerals, which means that in case of lease or licensing of major minerals, the Gram Sabha does not have any power. Fifthly, it has power to prevent alienation of land and restore the alienated land. The land cannot be taken forcefully from the tribal communities in these areas, and in these areas, if such land has been taken, the Gram Sabha has the power to restore such alienated land. And finally, the Gram Sabha will have power to regulate and restrict the sale or consumption of liquor. They have the powers of managing village markets, controlling money lending to the scheduled tribes, and ownership of minor forest produce. So all these points on this screen are very important for us from preliminary examination point of view. Now let us look at the questions which were asked in the previous year. Now this question was asked in the year 2012 in the preliminary examination. The question reads, in the areas covered under the Panchayat Extension to Scheduled Areas Act 1996, what is the role or power of Gram Sabha? The first statement reads, Gram Sabha has the power to prevent alienation of land in the scheduled areas. Now as we have learned, this power is with Gram Sabha. So this is a correct statement. Second statement reads, Gram Sabha has the ownership of minor forest produce. So you should notice the term minor forest produce here. And this is also a correct statement. The third statement reads, recommendation of Gram Sabha is required for granting prospecting license or mining lease for any mineral in the scheduled areas. Now this statement is incorrect because as we have read, the Gram Sabha only has powers relating to licensing of minor minerals in those scheduled areas. Hence the correct answer here is B, that is 1 and 2 only. Now these two questions were asked in the year 2013. This question reads, the government enacted the Panchayat Extension to Scheduled Areas Act in 1996. Which of the following is not identified as its objective? The first option is to provide self-governance. This statement is correct because it provides for Gram Sabha, which will deal with all the local developmental plans in that area. So it provides a provision for self-governance. Secondly, to recognize traditional rights. Yes, it provides traditional rights like ownership and management of various rights relating to minor forest produce, etc. So this is also correct. The third is to create autonomous regions in tribal areas. Now this statement is incorrect. And finally, to free the tribal people from exploitation. This statement is also correct because the PESA Act provides for various rights to the tribal communities in this area through the Gram Sabha. Now the question has asked which one of the following is not identified as its objectives. So in this case, the correct answer that you should take is C. That is, the third provision has not been provided as an objective of the PESA Act 1996. Another question that was asked in 2013 is, under the Scheduled Tribes and Other Traditional Forest Dwellers Recognition of Forest Right Act 2006, who shall be the authority to initiate the process for determining the nature and extent of individual or community forest rights or both? Now, as we have learned, this right rests with the Gram Sabha. So the correct answer is Gram Sabha. Now, as we have seen, all the provisions of the Forest Right Act and the PESA Act are important for us from preliminary examination point of view. So you should go through these points that we have discussed in the article in detail. Now, both these acts that we have discussed here are also important for us from mains examination point of view. As you can see, in the year 2017, there was a question which reads, What are the two major legal initiatives by the state since independence addressing the discrimination against the scheduled tribes or the STs? So both these acts are important for us from mains examination point of view as well. And this question was asked in the General Studies paper 1 of the mains examination in the year 2017. And with this, let us move on to the next article. Now, this article on page number 15 talks about an improvement in the index of industrial production, and it reads that the IIP growth rebounds. So this article will be important for us from preliminary examination syllabus under the topic economic development. Now, in this article, we will try to understand the basics of index of industrial production from our preliminary examination point of view. Now, let us understand what is IIP. So IIP stands for the index of industrial production, and it measures the quantum of changes in the industrial production in an economy, and it captures the general level of industrial activity in the country. So simply it measures the change in industrial production in any country. In India, the base year for IIP series is 2011 and 12. So simply if the current IIP reads as 107, it means that there has been a growth of 7% as compared to the base year. That is, the IIP for base year 2012-11 is considered as 100. And if the IIP reading is 107, it means there has been a growth of 7% as compared to the base IIP. Further, who calculates the index of industrial production? So it is compiled and published by the National Statistical Office under the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. So this is an important fact from prelims point of view. Further, the IIP has been categorized into two categories. The first is the sectoral classification. This includes the sectors of the economy. For example, the mining sector, the manufacturing sector, and the electricity sector. And the second categorization is based on the usage of the goods. So the second categorization is use based. Now, under the sectoral classification, the industrial production for the purpose of IIP is divided into three sectors, and these are the mining sector, the manufacturing sector, and the electricity sectors. So all these three should be kept in mind and are important from prelims point. Further, the highest weightage has been given to manufacturing in these three sectors. The second classification of IIP is based on the use-based classification, and it includes the primary goods, capital goods, infrastructure or construction goods, immediate goods, consumer durables, and consumer non-durables. So these are the 6 kind of goods that are included in the index of industrial production. Further, there are 8 core sectors or core industries in the IIP, and these core industries are the main or key industries of the economy. In most of the countries, these industries are the backbone of all other industries. And in India, there are 8 core sector industries. These include the coal, crude oil, natural gas, petroleum refinery products, fertilizers, steel, cement, and electricity. Further, the 8 core sectors constitute 40.27% of the total index of industrial production. This is another important fact that should be remembered. The highest weightage has been given to petroleum refinery production, and the lowest weightage has been given to fertilizers production. Now, the importance of IIP or the index of industrial production is that it is a single representative figure to measure the general level of industrial activity in an economy on a monthly basis. So it should also be kept in mind that IIP is released on a monthly basis. Further, it is used by the government agencies, departments, and especially the Ministry of Finance and RBI for policy purposes. Further, the All India IIP forms a crucial input for the compilation of gross value added of manufacturing sector in the GDP. So these 3 points reflect the importance of index of industrial production for Indian economy. Now, another important thing that should be kept in mind is the weight that has been assigned to the core sectors in the IIP or the index of industrial production. So the highest weight has been given to the refinery products, while the least weightage has been given to the fertilizers. So accordingly, the second highest is to electricity, at third number is the steel sector, at fourth number is the coal, at fifth is the crude oil, natural gas is sixth, cement is seventh, and fertilizers is the last, or it has the least weightage in the IIP core sectors. Now, regarding the question that was asked in 2015, it reads, in the index of 8 core industries, which one of the following is given the highest weight? So as we saw, the highest weightage has been given to the refinery products, and the second highest weightage is given to the electricity generation. As refinery products is not in the options, the correct answer is B, that is electricity generation. And regarding this question, which one of the following brings out the consumer price index number for industrial workers? The correct answer is the Labor Bureau. So you should know that who releases the index of industrial production as well. Now another question that was asked in the year 2012 read, in India, in the overall index of industrial production, the indices of 8 core industries have a combined weight of 37.90. Now the combined weight of 8 core industries was 37.90 in 2012. However, it has now been revised and it is around 40% now. So the question reads, which of the following are among those 8 industries? So now the textile can be easily eliminated, and with this we can eliminate two options, that is A and D. So we are left with B and C. However, we know that cement is included in the core sectors. So the correct answer is C, 1, 2, 3 and 4 only. With this, let us move on to the next article. Now this article on page number 13 talks about the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership deal. And this article reads that all the 16 nations set to final RCEP deal. Now in this background, India has not cleared its stand on joining the RCEP. So from preliminary examination point of view, let us look at the key details of RCEP or the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. Now regarding the RCEP or the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, you should note that it is a trade agreement which is being negotiated between ASEAN plus 6 countries. And you should note that there are 10 member countries of the ASEAN grouping. And besides these 10 countries, the other countries which will be a part of this RCEP will be Australia, China, India, Japan, New Zealand and South Korea. And this trade agreement covers goods, services, investments, intellectual property, etc. And it is also intended to be a free trade agreement. Now the member countries of this RCEP can be an important aspect for us from the preliminary examination point of view. Now besides the name of these plus 6 countries, you should also learn about the 10 countries which are members of the ASEAN grouping. And the names of these countries have been provided in the PDF which is attached to this video. Now after this, let us look at the chronological order in which the negotiations for RCEP has taken place. So here you should note that the ASEAN framework for the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership was adopted at the 19th ASEAN Summit in 2011 in Bali and Indonesia. However, the joint declaration for the launch of RCEP negotiations occurred in 2012 at the 21st Summit of ASEAN. Now this is an important fact for us from the preliminary examination point of view. And this summit took place at Cambodia. And all these RCEP negotiations are led by the ASEAN and would be based upon the vision of ASEAN centrality. Now here you should note that the ASEAN grouping is already having free trade agreement with the other 6 member countries of the RCEP. And this has been termed as ASEAN plus 1 free trade agreements. For example, ASEAN has free trade agreement with China, India, Australia, Japan, New Zealand, etc. So that is why the RCEP is trying to build upon the existing ASEAN plus 1 free trade agreement. Now the negotiations of RCEP are stuck on the interest of the member nations of these groupings. For example, India has negotiated for the liberalization of service sector because we know that India has an advantage in the service sector. However, India has been reluctant for the liberalization in the manufacturing sector because in this sector India has been lagging and China has a major advantage. So that can put the trade interests of India on the backstage. So that is why the negotiations are stuck on the interests of the particular countries. So the question that was asked in 2016 read, the term Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership often appears in the news in the context of the affairs of a group of countries known as. And we know that the RCEP negotiations are envisioned on the basis of ASEAN centrality. And that is why B is the correct option. Now this article on page number 14 talks about the discovery of water in an exoplanet. So this will form a part of the preliminary examination syllabus under the topic General Science and also under the current events of international importance. So this will form a part of the preliminary examination syllabus under the topic General Science and under the current events of international importance. So in this article, let us try and understand the key highlights of this discovery. Now this discovery is important because the water has been discovered for the first time in the atmosphere of an exoplanet. Now exoplanets simply refer to those planets which are outside our solar system. So this water has been discovered in the atmosphere of an exoplanet by the name K218b. And this planet has Earth-like temperatures which could support the life. Now regarding the size of this exoplanet, it is 8 times the mass of Earth and is twice as big as Earth as far as its dimensions are concerned. And this planet orbits in its star's habitable zone at a distance which is neither too far nor too close where water can exist in the liquid form. And this particular habitable zone where the liquid can be found or where the temperature is just right for the liquid to be present is known as the Goldilocks zone. And regarding the location of this exoplanet, this K218b orbits a red dwarf star which is about 110 light years distant. And this is a part of the Leo constellation of the Milky Way. So the name of the planet is important, and also the name of the zone where the liquid can be found outside our solar system. Now the question which was asked in the year 2015 reads, the term Goldilocks zone is often seen in the news in the context of. So the correct answer here was that it is seen in the news in the context of the search of Earth-like planets in the outer space. And this Goldilocks zone refers to a habitable zone near the star where liquid can be found because the temperature there will be suitable for the liquid to be present. Now this editorial on page number 10 talks about the recent changes to the Motor Vehicle Amendment Act 2019. And in this it is analyzing the outrage by various states against the heavy fines which are imposed by these act on traffic defaulters. So in this line, this editorial analyzes whether enhanced traffic fines under this act can drastically reduce accidents, or is there a need for other reforms? Now this will form a part of the General Studies paper 2, and the important aspects or the salient features of the Motor Vehicle Amendment Act 2019 has been completed in the DNS of 5th September 2019. So regarding the features of the Motor Vehicles Act 2019, you should go through this video. And in this article, let us analyze the issues which have been raised by the editorial. Now, this Motor Vehicle Amendment Act of 2019 is imposing heavy penalties on traffic violations. Now, these imposition of higher penalties has seen backlash from various states. And in this line, various states like Gujarat, Karnataka and Kerala etc. have reduced the quantum of penalties under this act. Now, the intent behind increasing these fines in the Motor Vehicle Act was to reduce the number of traffic violations, which are generally resulting in higher number of deaths on the roads of India. However, despite the imposition of such heavy penalties, the need of the hour is better enforcement and infrastructure for reducing the road deaths in India. So in this background, let us look at the section 198A of this Motor Vehicle Act, which provides for certain provisions to reduce the casualties on the roads of India. Now, this section 198A of the Motor Vehicles Act prescribes that any body, contractor or consultant who is into the road construction will have to follow a design, construction and maintenance standards which are prescribed by the central government to it. And if failure of these authorities to comply with the standards for road design and construction results in the death or disability of a person, such authority or contractor shall be punishable with a fine which may extend up to 1 lakh rupees. So the central government will prescribe certain standards which have to be followed during the road construction process. However, in case if these standards are not followed, and if the lack of following of such standards lead to the death or disability of a person, there will be fine which will be imposed on the contractor and concerned authority. Now, the issue with this provision is that this provision can only be invoked once there is an event of death or disability happening on the Indian roads. So in this background, the editorial mentions that the state should strictly ensure compliance without waiting for a road accident to prove the failure of construction or maintenance standard. So even without an event of death or disability happening on the roads, the state should ensure that these maintenance standards or the construction standards are followed by the contractors. Further, besides imposition of heavy penalties for the violation of traffic rules, there are other areas of reform which are required. So these reforms include the conditions of roads, traffic signals, signages and cautionary marks which affect the motorists, cyclists and the pedestrians must be upgraded in the entire country. And if the infrastructure does not meet the legal requirements which have been provided by the Government of India, such cases will be challenged in the courts in India. Further, the state government should reform the regional transport authorities or the RTOs. This is because these authorities are corruption ridden at the lower levels. Further, these RTOs can use electronic delivery of services to improve efficiency and transparency in its functioning. Further, the government vehicles and the VIPs must strictly follow the traffic rules and they should be penalized for traffic violations. And finally, the government must form the National Road Safety Board to recommend important changes to the infrastructure to enable professional accident investigation. So these are a few reforms which are suggested by the editorial and which can be used in answering questions related to the improvements that are required besides imposition of heavy penalties under the Motor Vehicles Act of 2019. So after this, you can try this question from your mains examination point of view. And with this, let's take up the next article. After today's discussion, let us try these practice questions and the answer will be displayed after 5 seconds. The first question reads, consider the following statements about PM Kisan Mandhan Yojana. The first is that it will be implemented by Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, which is correct. Second is that the farmers can opt to allow their monthly contribution to the scheme to be made from the benefits drawn from PM Kisan scheme directly, which is also correct. Hence the correct answer is C, both 1 and 2. Second question reads, consider the following statements about Eklavya Model Residential School. First is that this scheme was started by Ministry of Human Resources in 1997, which is incorrect because it was started by the Ministry of Tribal Affairs. Second is that every block with more than 50% ST population and at least 20,000 tribal peoples will have an EMRS, which is correct. So the correct answer is B, that is 2 only. Third is that consider the following about IIP or the Index of Industrial Production. First is that it is released by National Statistical Office, which is correct. Second is that the base year of IIP is 2011 and 12. So the correct answer is C, both 1 and 2. Fourth question is that water has been discovered for the first time from which of the following exoplanets? So the name of the planet is C, that is K218b. With this, we have come to the end of today's discussion. Now let's move on to the question for today.